Hey everyone, I'm Jason Del Rey from Recode. Welcome to our second session of our Code Commerce at Home series. For those who joined us last week for my conversation with Nancy Green from Old Navy, thank you. I greatly enjoyed it. I hope to have more feedback from all of you. LinkedIn, Twitter, email, you can find all of that online, and I'll go over that at the end. I also want to thank our sponsor, Klarna. They're the payments company that allows retailers to offer buy now, pay later options to customers. They're helping make this event possible. I'm really excited about today's discussion. When I set out to program this series, I wanted a cross-section of traditional retailers, big e-commerce companies, but also I really wanted to hear from someone who was trying to build a young, exciting brand during this crazy time sort of in the world and also in the business world. So I'm happy to welcome Olamide Olowe, who's the co-founder and CEO of Topicals, a new direct-to-consumer with real-life wholesale plans as well, skincare business. So Olamide, hey, thanks for joining us today.
Hi there. Hi, Jason. Thank you for having me.
So, yeah, my pleasure. So much to talk about today. We're going to try to get all of it in. And that just reminds me to our viewers, if this is your first time attending one of our events, we love audience questions. You should be able to type those in toward the bottom of your screen. Just tell us who you are when you ask your question. And toward the end of the discussion, I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. So why don't you give us first just sort of the quick background on what your company is trying to do in sort of innovating in the skincare space, and also sort of what expertise you and your co-founder had that sort of drove you to this opportunity.
Topicals is transforming the way people feel about skin. We do that through effective product and through also our donation to mental health organizations. People with chronic skin conditions are 2 to 6 times more likely to suffer from depression and anxiety. So we donate to mental health organizations. We're also on a mission to create funner flare-ups, which basically means that we want to take things that have always been clinical or really hard to approach, especially for communities of color. We want to make it super accessible, super fun, and easy for you to understand. Co-founder.
So go ahead.
Sorry. My co-founder, Claudia, she's brilliant. She has been working at Stanford since she was 14 in the Department of Dermatology. She grew up with super severe eczema and studied a ton of diseases like epidermolysis bullosa, non-melanoma skin cancer, and also eczema. She has 6 dermatology publications under her belt, with her 7th pending currently. She leads everything product at the company. And so she used her experience in clinical research to develop products that were on par with medical-backed, science-backed skincare. My personal background, I worked and built a brand under the Shea Moisture label when I was in college. Mm-hmm. I built a brand called Shea Girl, which was a tween. No one was really calling it Gen Z back in 2015, but a tween beauty brand for young women of color. And what I learned from Shea Moisture was how to build a brand for an underserved consumer group, how to do well by doing good. And so I took that experience, and because I also grew up with a ton of chronic skin conditions like ingrown hairs, acne, hyperpigmentation, boils, I knew what it felt like to be outside of the beauty industry, and I wanted to create a brand that transformed the way people felt about skin.
And what we talked about a little bit when I got to know you a bit a couple of weeks ago, and what I've read about your brand is messaging about, there's a lot of messaging in the beauty industry, skincare industry about attaining perfect skin. And it sounds like, a lot of companies talk about authenticity and being authentic. And, what I've gathered from you is that you and your company think that sort of that, shooting for that in this industry, that perfect skin, mission or goal is really not attainable. Am I thinking about how you are thinking about that? And if so, just describe how you're trying to message that to your customers.
That's super accurate. People with chronic skin conditions will never find a cure for their skin condition. It's very much a lifelong condition that you live with. You just learn how to, build your lifestyle around that condition. And so for us to go out to our community and tell them, use our product and aspire to have perfect skin, it's not realistic, and it's damaging to people's mental health. I'm actually not wearing makeup right now, and a lot of my interviews actually don't. One, because I love to use our products and they work, but also just because I think, especially for female founders, we have been, we sit on this pedestal. And I was actually talking about this with a friend of mine last night, that we sit on this pedestal where we have this second job of having to be like the face of our beauty brand. And so a lot of us have to wear makeup or have to look pretty and have everything in all the right places. And so we're excited to just to remove negative language from skincare. What is good skin? What is bad skin? Good and bad are obviously terms that mean different things to different people. And so for us, we, again, create funner flare-ups. So we would love for you to have less frequent and less painful flare-ups, but we're never going to promise you that your condition will completely go away. And instead, we just have more fun. So we poke fun at beauty standards. We do a lot of really fun things. There is some really fun stuff in the works. So keep an eye on us like really, really soon to see some fun stuff coming from us. But we just want to transform the way people feel about skin, and particularly around the Gen Z and millennial demographic. We grew up, with MTV. We grew up with a ton of brands, Disney Channel, where no one really talked about taboo subjects like eczema or psoriasis. And so what we want to do is, relive and remix that time period for our community. And so that's why in our branding, you see a nod to the early 2000s and the 90s, because we're all yearning for a better time. And we're hoping that with our brand and with our products, we allow people to have a bit of an escape from this reality of wanting everyone to have perfect skin.
So let's talk about the products a little bit. So you've launched earlier this year with, I believe, 2 products. Is that accurate? And can you just explain briefly what those 2 are?
Yeah, we launched August 7th. So on Friday, it'll be 2 months old. So really excited about that. Yeah. We launched in partnership with Nordstrom, and we launched 2 products. One is called Faded, which is a hyperpigmentation brightening and clearing gel. It targets things like discoloration, dark spots. It can help with the appearance of melasma or hyperpigmentation. We've also seen really great benefits for people with acne, with textured skin or scarring. And then our second product is called Like Butter, and it's a hydrating mask for dry, sensitive, eczema-prone skin. And we released those 2 products in conjunction. We actually sell a third SKU on our site called the Duo, which is both of those 2 products together. Because what we noticed when we were going through the process, which took 2 years to actually go from idea, 2018, all the way to launch in 2020, was that our customers, particularly like women of color, have super high reactive melanocytes, which is the cell that produces pigment. And we noticed that hyperpigmentation was their number one concern. And so when we went out to beta test last year in 2019 in August, we found that a lot of people were really excited about our products because no one was tackling hyperpigmentation in a safe and effective way for all skin tones. We make sure that all of our products are tested from the lightest of skin tones to the darkest of skin tones, because we've seen in hair care and in cosmetics, inclusivity really take hold. But in the skincare industry, we haven't really seen that. And not just in the representation, but also in the product development. And so we wanted to make products that were really safe and effective for darker skin tones, because 75% of dermatology clinical trial participants are white, meaning that a lot of the ingredients that exist on the market currently are not proven to be safe for darker skin tones. And we see that with ingredients like hydroquinone, which don't have as much safety around darker skin tones. And actually, if you, with prolonged use, you can actually see skin cell pigment death. And so we wanted to really make sure that our product—
That sounds not good.
Yeah, not good. We wanted to make sure that our product was safe, again, from the lightest of skin tones to the darkest of skin tones. And then we made it paired together with those 2, because what we found through our community was that hyperpigmentation was the secondary response, and that the initial response was actually an inflammatory skin condition. So that could be anything like eczema or acne or psoriasis. And that's what helped us really unlock what we're trying to do here at Topicals, which is take over the chronic skincare aisle. We started to notice that, when you walked into a CVS or you walked into a Walgreens, the beauty aisle was very separate from the chronic skincare aisle. And we thought that was very weird, because we grew up with skin conditions, right? And so we had to go to two separate aisles. And I think Shea Moisture, again, my experience there was invaluable, is a really great example of this, where we had the ethnic hair aisle and then we had the hair aisle. And we feel the same way with chronic skin and the beauty aisle. And our mission and our vision is to take our products and to take efficacious medical backed products and bring them into the science. And bring them into the beauty world.
So if you're launching a startup like this, which seems like it needs to be heavily based in science. You talked about the background, your co-founder's background. Do you also need to have employ directly dermatologists, or what does the rest of your staff look like? And if you don't employ those, how do you sort of get the backing you need to build credibility among consumers?
That's a really great question. So it's a two-pronged question. Two-pronged answer, to be completely honest. One, yes,
I think I have like two or three questions in there too. So not your fault.
No, but the first is that, yes, we have to, at Topicals, we believe good product is table stakes. I think in the D2C world, we've seen people really lean on brand, really lean on distribution, and not really have a product that was differentiated. But we knew that was important for us, because initially we thought, oh, maybe we just, provide access to prescriptions for this consumer, or we do X, Y, and Z. And when we really started to do the study, we realized that, no, we need to create a differentiated product that is safer, effective, and gentle for different skin tones. And so we have a scientific advisory board right now that's led by the head of pediatric dermatology from Stanford. And so she co-creates our products with us. On that advisory board is another Stanford MD PhD, as well as a chemist who has both her bachelor's and master's in designing products for, chronic skin conditions. And so our team on that side is very stacked. And what we do and what we're really proud and excited about is that because of Claudia, my co-founder's background at Stanford, we have access to a lot of information at Stanford that just pretty much sits on the shelves. What we say is that it's locked in this tower of academia. Both Claudia and I actually went to college to become dermatologists. Our parents are still kind of upset at us for ditching medical school and raising money and going to build this company. But we knew that if we became dermatologists for doing this company, that both of us as women of color, our communities would suffer, right? Well, they wouldn't get access to care, because we know in the United States, healthcare is a very, very difficult thing to access. And so we took a lot of that learning and a lot of the networks and relationships that we built at Stanford or at UCLA, where I went to undergrad, and we're now bringing that information to the forefront. So that's the first half around dermatologists. We work with, our head of education is actually a licensed esthetician. So everyone that is giving you advice from the Topicals team is either licensed or has had 10 plus years of experience in the clinical research dermatology space. On the other side, connected to what I talked about earlier, is that I said that 75% of dermatology clinical trial participants are white. Or, for example, about 60% of dermatologists and dermatology residents say that their medical school training did not prepare them to treat skin of color. And so when we start to look at the data around medical back skincare and communities of color, we start to see that there's not much of an overlap. And so while we definitely heed to science and we definitely lean into the science, we also have to question systems and institutions and really try to understand why there hasn't been inclusivity in dermatology, when, you'd think for something that is like literally skin-based, for there to be a lot of like discrimination and lack of diversity in dermatology. It's actually really scary. And that's why, Black people and African Americans are actually higher rates. They die at higher rates with skin cancer, which is crazy, because you think, you're a darker skin tone, you don't need to wear sunscreen, or you don't need to, use skincare products. But because of that lack of access and that the difficulties in accessing care for people of color, we actually see them have negative effects when they're see dermatologists.
So how do you, you talked about, we're going to talk about the launch, only a few months old. And you mentioned that you've worked on this problem for, I think you said 2 years. How'd you try or think about funding this research and the work needed just to get to August of this current year? And maybe you can describe, I think there was some outside funding, and maybe you can describe what that process was like.
Right. So this idea in kind of one of its final forms, because it's obviously always evolving, but August 2018, when I graduated undergrad UCLA, I realized that wasn't going to go straight to medical school, and I wasn't going to take the consulting offer I had. I was going to build a company. And this is because when I was at Shea Moisture, I'd worked at the company from 2015 to 2017. So when I was a sophomore in college to when I was in my senior year. In those 2 years, we learned everything about building that a brand for an underserved consumer, right? And we pitched to major retailers like Walmart, Target, and Ulta, understanding social selling, because in 2015, that's when Glossier first launched on Instagram. Yeah. And so I learned a lot about what it would take to get a brand up and running. And I knew that the number one thing is that we needed to build a community before we built a product. We wanted to do it simultaneously, and that's eventually what we did. But we really wanted to build a community because we knew that this was a product and a company that isn't just, it's a lifestyle, right? It's not just, oh, I buy this one product, I buy a lipstick or an eyeshadow palette and I'm out the door. It's when I find something that works, because this is a condition that is really a medical condition, I stick with that forever. And so what we did and what we set out to do back in August of 2018, I met my co-founder actually in January 2019. Last year. And so what I set out to do in those first couple of months is to first do a bunch of research on how people were talking about chronic skin conditions, how they were feeling about themselves, the words that they said, the ways they were accessing care, and then the behaviors around just like an ecosystem around that customer. And so that's what I first did. And I sought out different people and started to build networks. And I think the number one thing that has helped us in fundraising is to build networks. I was super fortunate that I had just graduated from UCLA and was eligible for first round capital and General Catalyst college funds, which is Dorm Room Fund and Rough Draft Ventures. So that was the first money I had into the company to try and get products to market. If you know anything about the beauty world, it's expensive to create a custom product. Yeah. And that's what we wanted to do when we realized that there wasn't enough differentiated product in this chronic skincare space. We were really fortunate to do Mucker Labs. We got into Mucker Labs early 2019, and that money actually. Can
you just explain for people who might not know briefly what that program is?
So Mucker Labs is an accelerator like YC. They're based in Santa Monica. They were the actually first investors in Honey, the company that just exited for $4 billion to PayPal. And so they have a really great eye for new businesses, especially ones that most other investors don't see can be lucrative. And so we were able to join in there and get a lot of help from William and Eric, who are the partners there. And we work to really understand, again, the community, because I think in this space, anyone can launch a product, but it's really hard to understand the community and really build a brand that is centered around them. And so people talk.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is that community like? What does that look like for you? Because obviously, we're going to talk about, looking at the history of direct-to-consumer brands and taking learnings and lessons from failures and successes. But with community, that word is thrown around a lot. So yeah, help us understand what it looked like for you building that.
Yeah, I almost wish there was another word for community, because everyone really does say community. And I think community isn't just Instagram followers or people on your email list. It's community is people who have a shared sense of an experience, I think. And I think community started first with Claudia and I. When we first met, we bonded over growing up. And for example, for her, never going to sleepovers because she never wanted to take her ointments with her because she didn't want people to make fun of her. Or for me, it was growing up with ingrown hairs and, never wanting to go wear a swimsuit or go to the pool because I didn't want anyone to see my legs or see, my ingrown hairs. And I was always embarrassed about that. And I think that feeling of embarrassment and that feeling of outsiderness is where I feel like the strongest communities are built. And so for us, what we did, because we knew that people with chronic skin conditions, the first line of defense for them is usually like a web search on what's going on with my skin. We knew we wanted to educate people in a way that was fun. Fun has always been a core tenet of what we believe at Topicals, because everything else is not fun. Going to the dermatologist and scheduling that appointment is not fun. Walking down the CVS ointment aisle is not fun. Applying ointments is not a fun thing to do. And so what we first did to kick off and really kind of put feelers out that we were trying to build a community is that we built a game called Skin, Sun, and Stars, which is, it was a digital game, which was a mashup between your horoscope and skincare advice. And people loved it. We had 10,000 plays in about 2 months. And
how did you promote that? Did you do any paid traffic toward that?
No, not at all. We did Twitter and Instagram. And so what we did is that we incentivized people and told them, for every play and share that we get will donate $1 to mental health organizations. And so because the mental health component is really tied to how people see themselves and how they experience their skin, we knew that these things would drive people to play the game, and also for a great cause, for us to donate money to an organization that has helped all of us. Sad Girls Club was actually the organization we chose to first partner with. And so that game would spit out basically a horoscope based on the skincare conditions that you had selected. And it's very science-backed, right? Where we threw in horoscopes there because we knew our community really liked horoscopes. But if you, for example, said that you had acne, we would select an ingredient based on your rising moon, and it would be like different ingredients. And people really enjoyed it because it was accessing education and information in a way that was fun versus just reading a WebMD page, right? And so when we started to understand that our customers really enjoyed education, we really leaned into Twitter versus Instagram. We actually, an article came out this week about us talking about our Twitter strategy and what we've seen on that platform. And for us, I think community is where people are. And I think for beauty brands, they don't necessarily look at Twitter as a place. I think they said that we're like one of the top skincare brands on Twitter right now. And
you're 2 months old.
Yeah.
Because you're actually, I mean, from what I've seen, and you mentioned this, leaning into education up front. And for education, often you need text. And while you can, while yes, Instagram comments exist, it's very much not a text-based medium. Is that part of the draw or the what makes sense about that medium for you?
Exactly. So something that we realized early on, we didn't have money when we were first really building this business. So affording a design agency that could make our branding perfect on day one was not something that we could do. We also wanted to build our brand in real life with our customers. And so we tried Instagram first. And when we realized we didn't have an aesthetic and we couldn't really compete with other brands who had like perfect pictures, we ended up just using our Instagram as a mood board. So we'd post people with visible skin conditions in very like editorial shots, and we just would do that. And so on Instagram, we got well known as the brand who was, making chronic skin conditions more approachable for people. But then on Twitter, it's really cheap to create content on Twitter. If you have the education or the information, all you have to do is literally type up a thread and send it out to people, right? And so we leaned there a lot, and we're really excited because skincare Twitter is a really huge thing right now where, again, because education and because text is really important in educating someone on skincare, Instagram hasn't been the best place for that. And so skincare Twitter is like a huge like place on the internet, basically, where people are giving skincare advice. It's usually estheticians, licensed estheticians that are giving advice. And so we actually brought Lillian Jaroge, who's our head of education. She's a really big esthetician. She's a key opinion leader. She has about 100,000 followers. She's our current head of education. And so she leads out every other Thursday, a session on different things. So last week we talked about ingrown hairs. The week before that, we talked about mental health and skin health and the connection there. And one that we're actually really famous for, because in around May, when we were going to actually go out to launch for the second time, our launch was delayed twice.
Yeah, I want to try to get to that too.
Yeah, we put out a thread that was a tear gas irritation skin thread, and it's had over 1 million impressions at this point. And it was really great for us because it really allowed us to put a stake in the ground around what we believed in socially, but also we were a skincare brand that was educating people in a way that they hadn't seen before. I don't think there had ever been a skincare thread on tear gas irritation.
And this was during sort of height of protests or in the wake. Obviously, we're seeing protests continue around the country, but this was a few weeks back, was it, or a month?
Yeah, this was June.
This was June. Okay. So you were supposed to launch initially. The original plan A was March. Is that correct?
Yep.
And what went into what did you have to put on pause, or what made you realize March, with the pandemic really hitting the U.S. in a hard way, was that launch wasn't either possible or the smartest move then?
So my co-founder and I are really engaged in dermatology. And so we were actually in London for a dermatology conference in January. And on our way back, we had started to hear about COVID. And so we actually knew COVID was going to hit the United States before a lot of other brands did, which is why we released that game in February. That was like that digital game, because we knew digital was going to be huge and we ought to get in there before, I don't know if you remember, but at that time, it's like everyone was doing an IG live as soon as everyone realized that, you couldn't go into stores anymore. So we had kind of kicked that off a little bit earlier. And we tried our best to kind of get our supply chain in order before it really hit hard in March. But our supply chain got disrupted because we use ingredients from outside of the United States. And so when that happened, we realized, okay, let's focus on community building instead of focusing on, stressing out that we don't have product right now. We were able to get samples, so like mini, portions of our product out, and we had people test them first. And that was really great for us because we've now seen a bunch of repeat purchases from those samples. And then the second time we went out to launch was in May, around the when the Black Lives Matter protests erupted, and we realized that it would be wrong of us to launch, especially as two women of color who have faced discrimination in different parts of our lives. We realized that the best thing that we could do was to take our marketing budget and donate that to mental health causes, especially around people of color. And so we donated to Therapy for Black Girls, Sad Girls Club, and Fearless Femme 100. And then finally, on August 7th, we were able to launch in partnership with Nordstrom through Poppin.
Yeah, so there's a lot there, and it's I have so many questions that we may not get to, just about trying to keep level-headed and focused through all these different events. But from a business perspective, how do you, as a first-time brand, launch? You launched on your own website, but also with Nordstrom. I believe Nordstrom.com. Can you give us any insight into how brands might be able to launch with a partner like that, first time around? Yeah.
We launched with Nordstrom.com and then 4 locations in the US. So New York City, Seattle, and then 2 in Seattle and 1 in LA. And so I think something that we've always done at Topicals is start with the end in mind almost, or start with that larger goal in mind and then working backwards. And so something I knew from my experience at Shea Moisture, but then also from studying the great Webb Smith of 2PM, is that linear commerce is really important. And so every brand is a media brand.
What does that mean to you?
Linear commerce is basically every brand is a media brand. Everyone should be thinking, and I was having this conversation last night with a friend, everyone should be thinking about their brand as a media brand and not just as I sell a certain thing. Because I think these days the pay to play model is really hard. Even brands who are successful at it is eating a chunk of their budget. I look at influencers and I'm so surprised when, we look at them and they have, 300,000 followers or 3 million followers, some of them on TikTok, and they don't have a product to monetize their audience, right? And so we're borrowing from their audience. And so I knew that I wanted to do customer acquisition in a way that maybe the other D2C brands didn't want to do. And so for us, that meant retail. I've always thought from my days with Shea Moisture that omni-channel was the right way to go, because accessibility has always been a big thing for us. Not everyone in the United States has access to reliable internet, and so for us to think that to be only to launch on internet would be in some places of the United States wouldn't be accessible for some people. And so we wanted to get a partner that could really, one, hold up the microphone on the story we're trying to tell around mental health and skin health, but we also wanted to be as accessible as possible. And we wanted to choose a partner that would help us do that. And so we're really excited to get a chance to do that for a limited time through Poppin at Nordstrom.
And just for those who don't know, the Poppin is a brief. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so Poppin just gives indie brands an opportunity to retail their products in their stores and online and get visibility and exposure, but it's not a long-term partnership. A lot of people, end up deciding to stay. Some people leave and go to other retailers or decide that retail isn't for them. I think I like to run Topicals like a tech company where we're always in constant iteration. The version you see today may not be the version you see tomorrow, and we're always going to be hopefully trending up and to the right. And so something that you asked me earlier that I didn't get to was, how do you find retailers, or how do you get connected to retailers? Yep. I am what people call the LinkedIn warrior. I cold emailed a retail consultant who actually has been super instrumental in our brand and in investors and in finding investors and in getting partners for retail. But I found her and she has amazing connections. And I just pitched her saying, hey, do you want to blow her up and give her a shout or yeah, Cara LaForgia is amazing. She is based in New York City, and she's probably one of the best people to know. She's going to be huge in terms of her ability to help create the next generation of, I think, D2C and consumer brands. She already has a really amazing portfolio. She's an angel investor, an advisor, an operator. But she was really awesome in seeing me. This is when we didn't really have anything. We weren't topicals in the way that people see us today. She just saw something in our brand and said, retailers are going to want to have this in stores. And so she sent out some emails, and before you know it, we got in contact with the Nordstrom team and were able to retail there. So I'd say cold email people, cold LinkedIn message people, because it does work. Okay, great. I see a bunch of questions. I'm going to try to get a few more in, and then we'll go to some of the audience questions. I've seen, both in Nordstrom.com and then also in your own site, it seems like I've seen, customers asking about products selling out, multiple times within 2 months. Do you use selling out products as a strategy, or what's behind the scenes there? Jason, I really wish we were using it as a strategy, because the amount of messages we get is really a lot. And for us, it's not really a strategy, because we obviously have revenue goals to hit. We have plans for the company, and we really want to build this into a big brand for our consumers and for our community. And so, no, it's not a strategy. It actually really is that we just continuously sell out, because I remember when we were pitching and we pitched to everybody. When I tell you pitch to everybody, and so many people said no to me, and I look back and I'm grateful that they said no, because we found the absolute best investors in Lear Hippo and Yvonne Orji, Issa Rae, Bozoma St. John, Hannah Bronfman. But at that time, one investor said something that really stuck with me, and he said, "It looks like you're in a category where there's dormant demand." Meaning under this, you can't see anything on top of the surface, but under the surface, people are bursting and looking for options. And in the space, and we kind of talked about the science around just products not being safe. But when you're in the eczema category, the top ways and the most affordable ways to get product that can help your skin is through prescription steroids. But a lot of new research has come out, and people are actually having what's called topical steroid withdrawal, which basically means your skin becomes addicted to the active ingredient in that topical steroid, and you blow out when you try to wean off it, because you think, oh, I'm my eczema's cured, I'm good to go. Your body actually blows up in full-blown hives. And so what we've seen with a lot of people is that prescription options maybe have some side effects that people aren't happy about, and the current over-the-counter products right now haven't been innovated in 30 years. And so I think for us, people are just really excited to see, one, a brand led by two young women of color, to see branding that is completely different from what you see in that aisle. And then three, to have product that's effective and safe. And so for us, we really do try to stay in stock as much as possible, because our customers need the product. We take it really seriously, because this isn't just a face mask or a nail polish. This is something that someone uses to, not scratch their skin off, or to not have to go to the doctor. And so we try to make sure at least that our supply chain's in stack. But when we launched, we had no idea that we'd sell out at Nordstrom within 48 hours of our launch there, and then later that week on our site. And now we're forecasting, obviously, because Q4, I think we're walking into Q4 now. And so we're forecasting to hopefully be ahead of the sellouts this
Yeah, I was going to ask what the main is it really just a question of more demand than you expected? Is it a product or packaging material thing? It sounds like it's demand being ahead of
demand.
Yep.
Yeah. But also you have to think about our products. We're not the typical beauty brand, right? Our products are not just, we threw something in a bottle that we found on a chemist's shelf. It really is custom and proprietary. And so there is a lot of supply chain, hoops you got to jump through to get a product like this onto market, and for it to perform and be stable and work well for the customer. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. And so for us now on our supply chain, we're strengthening that up, because there is just so many hoops we have to jump through to get that product out to the customer.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to jump to some, we have a ton of audience questions, and then hopefully I'll squeeze in some of my own. Okay. The first is, I think it's from Forrest, is his or her name. Congratulations on the success of your company. Can you talk about the process of finding investors?
For us, it was really hard. So it was a 2-year process of us trying to find investors. We had to pitch to over 100 investors before we found the ones that really believed in what we were doing. I think the best thing that you can do is to pitch not just a product, because the investors aren't looking to invest in just brands that have one product. They're actually looking to invest in ideas that are going to transform a category. And so what we did, and you'll see in the way we kind of talk about our products is that we're transforming the way people feel about skin. And so that means that we're not just today just going to do eczema or hyperpigmentation, but that we look at that category and try to really understand how can we make a difference in that category. And so that's really the number one way, I think, when you're approaching investors, because you can get in front of them and they can all tell you no. But what you really want to do is, one, come at it at the mindset of changing a category. And then two, to find investors. I mentioned earlier, Kara, she was amazing. And I think networks, unfortunately, is the number one way to get access to investors. And we were very fortunate that we were able to, I was able to find her via LinkedIn. But I think like in this day and age, I don't know how people are finding investors because there's obviously not these like things that you can join into or these, pitch nights that people can usually go to. But Twitter has been instrumental in making relationships for me. There's so many investors who have just hit me up in DMs, or I've hit them up in the DMs and said, hey, like, I really like your philosophy around what you're doing. Like, can I talk to you about what I'm building? Or they'll approach me. And I think getting into VC Twitter is what they call it, is really helpful. So following people like Jamie Schmidt or Chris Cantino, there's a ton of people on Twitter right now that are talking about consumer businesses, and they'll be really helpful for pitching your product to them or just even getting to know them. Okay.
The beauty space is so competitive. How are you able to gain market share? That's from Kelly.
Great question, Kelly.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
So choose how you see fit to answer that.
I think the big thing is that beauty is not a winner take all market. And so I don't ever think about it like that when we're approaching what we're doing. We don't think about how do we become the number one skincare brand in the world, because old conglomerates sit there and they have huge marketing budgets that make it almost impossible for any kind of indie brand to become the number one brand within 5 to 10 years, to be quite honest. What we think about is where can we innovate where the customer hasn't seen a product or a differentiation or a different story. And so for us, that was chronic skincare. Like if you can name off the top of your head any brands today that sit in that chronic skincare space that live alongside, the Glossiers or the Drunk Elephants of the world, that are not us. Like I'd love to hear it, but for us, that's what we really saw, was that there wasn't a brand that you were excited to pull out of your bag in front of your friends, or there wasn't a brand in that chronic skincare space that you wanted to live on your vanity versus, hiding it under the sink like we all do, because we don't want anyone to see our ointments or our scratch creams. And so because of that, that's how we really carved out this space in the beauty world. It's technically, we're not actually like a beauty brand. We're more of like a skincare brand, because the way it's thought about right now, chronic skincare is not part of the beauty conversation. But that's where we saw an area to differentiate, is like, okay, let's merge two categories that technically haven't really had attention just yet.
Great. I actually have a question I want to squeeze in. I think it was on Twitter, maybe, there were some, you had some fun with customer feedback, and the feedback you've gotten, I've seen in some reviews and maybe on social channels too, is around the smell of one of the products. And so I'll let you explain that, but why don't you tell us a little bit about where you all look for customer feedback and what you actually do with it as a young brand?
Yeah, so Fave is a stinky legend. She smells not like flowers, and we're okay with people saying that. Like, we love the honest feedback of people saying it doesn't smell bad, but you know what? We're also sold out of that product. And so that's actually our best seller, our number one requested product, but it's also the product that people think smell the worst. And in this category, sensitive skin is really who we serve. And so fragrance has come under fire a lot with dermatologists and in a lot of educated skincare spaces around that leading to sensitivity of skin. And so we had to leave out fragrance in all of our products, and we'll continue to do so. And so in that instance, when you actually explain to customers, one, you use humor, which we always do, which is like, she's a stinky legend. That's one thing. And the second is just explaining to customers why it smells bad. Because if they think it smells bad because you have, some kind of issue with the product, then that's not good, right? Yeah. But when you start to explain to them that fragrance has actually been at the root of why maybe you have sensitized skin or you have sensitive skin, people start to understand that the old way of using beauty as just a luxury, it doesn't work for you if you have a skin condition. And so once we start to educate people around that fact, we stop getting questions about it, or if we get questions about it, people are like, it smells, but it's the best thing that's ever worked on my skin. And what we do is obviously we take that in and right now we're obviously trying to work on versions that maybe get rid of that smell, but we'll never compromise people's skin just to get a product that, smells good. Because at the end of the day, you're using this product because it's almost like it's not a prescription, but it's a product that is supposed to be like helping you treat or helping you alleviate symptoms of a skin condition. And so once you explain that to people, I think they understand it a bit, but we try not to get bogged down too much with the details of what people want, because then you'll just be scrambling around changing your product every 2 minutes. But like I said earlier in the conversation, we operate like a tech company where we try our best to iterate and have version 1, version 2, version 3. And so we'll continue to do that, but we try also not to get bogged down by the details of what customers ask.
So that answers a great lead into a couple more audience questions around ingredients and sort of government approval or oversight of your products. So the first one is the beauty world has been criticized in the last few years around ingredients and chemicals used that are either 1, bad for people, or 2, bad for the earth. How are you looking at ingredients in your products and the climate crisis?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think the first thing that has been extremely controversial over the last 10 years is just around natural and clean products. So all of our products are considered clean. If you were to walk into a Sephora and see that's the stamp of approval that says clean at Sephora, we would fit into that, right? So meaning like we've done our best to try and make sure that our products are safe and effective, not just generally, but also, again, like I mentioned earlier, for people of color who a lot of those ingredients haven't been tested on their skin tone. So that's number one. But number two, I think there's this conversation around chemicals and what people have been, I feel like the beauty industry has pushed people into this like natural space now where everyone is scared of chemicals, but everything is a chemical. Water is a chemical. Plants are chemicals. So using this word chemical to say like something is negative or bad is not accurate, because every single thing, meat, plants, the air, everything is a chemical. And so to say that you're afraid of chemicals isn't, the most accurate way to say that you're afraid of things. And I think for us, we use products that are also not natural, right? We use things that are safe synthetics. So these are ingredients that have had tons of clinical research to back that it's not detrimental to someone's skin. And what we also ask people when they're having conversations with us around, oh, is this safe for my skin? Is that it's not natural. Is it safe for my skin? Poison ivy is natural, but you don't want to touch poison ivy, Right. And so we have to use good judgment around ingredients, because just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good for you. And so that's how we think about our ingredients. And in terms of climate, all of our packaging is sustainable. So we actually chose aluminum tubes because they're the number one thing that you can recycle versus plastic or versus other types of materials. And so we try our best in our supply chain to be clean and to have sustainability at the forefront of what we do, because we want to obviously live on this earth for a long time. And we know that beauty companies can be extremely wasteful. So we tried our best to cut down on paper use or on things that weren't necessary. So even when we sent out PR packages, everyone got the same PR package versus wasting, tons of paper and flowers and all these things and what people usually get. We just said everyone's on the same playing field, and we're just going to give everyone the sustainable box. Both our customers and influencers, press, everyone got the same thing.
On the ingredient question, I get your point about the chemicals versus natural is part of what's also behind the answer. And then this is my guess, you tell me if I'm right or wrong, that certain that for the conditions that you are looking at, that certain quote unquote natural ingredients just don't do the job, or am I reading too much into your answer?
No, that's exactly accurate. I think at the end of the day, when you have a chronic skin condition, you want something that works, and again, we talk about not having perfect skin. When we talk about our products working, we talk about, like I said earlier, fun or flare up. So that's less painful, less frequent. And I think this is not a category like a face mask or a nail polish or even a hair product is. This is honestly sometimes people's life and death situation around being able to go to work if you have a flare up on your face, or, not being able to walk because the back of your knees have a big flare up. And so we really have to make sure that the product works for people, but we also need to make sure that it's safe. And so, which is why we don't use some of the ingredients that you see in prescription products, but that's also why we can't be 100% natural, because there are so many safe synthetics out there that you may still be using, even if you don't think you are. There's so many safe synthetics out there that are super important for everyday life.
We have another question from, I think it's Margot, which somewhat related is, did you need any FDA approvals, and are the products overseen by anyone or entity, or do they have FDA oversight?
So we sit in an interesting category where it's called like cosmeceuticals, which is like our products sometimes act as cosmetics. They sometimes act as OTC products. If your product is considered an OTC product, an over-the-counter product, it is, you do have to register with the FDA. We've had conversations with the FDA about a ton of different things, like the FDA monograph, which is this list of ingredients that are approved to claim treatment. And so what we've had to do, because a lot of those ingredients are actually not ingredients that customers say they want to use, right? These are a lot of these chemicals that people talk about is what's listed on that FDA list. And so in order to have that oversight, you have to include some of those ingredients. And so what we've done is that we take some of the ingredients that we know are super safe that are on that list. For example, in our eczema product, we have colloidal oatmeal, which has had tons and tons of research. And it's also something that is safe. And we include that in our product, right? And so those kinds of products have, I wouldn't say, I guess, like oversight from the FDA, but they give you a list. So you have to stay within the bounds of what they give you. If not, then you will be, they'll call out what you have to do. But the cosmetics industry generally doesn't have much oversight other than calling out certain claims. But we've worked with the FDA to figure out, like, what can we say, especially if we don't want to include some of the ingredients that our customers aren't happy about. But if in order to include those ingredients, we almost like, you can only say certain things if you include certain ingredients. And so sometimes, although our product is really effective, we can't claim a treatment to it because we don't have an ingredient in there that the FDA says, this is one that we say you can say this with. So hydroquinone.
Do you eventually want to work toward that, or is that something that you actively don't want in terms of oversight?
It's a half and half, right? And so, like, for example, for hyperpigmentation, the only ingredient on that list is hydroquinone. So we're not interested in pursuing an FDA or an OTC designation for that product because it's not safe for darker skin tones. And so we will not have an OTC designation, and we won't have FDA oversight, I guess, in that particular area. But for example, for our eczema product, we're currently working on getting that OTC designation because all we have to do to get that is to increase the amount of colloidal oatmeal we have in our formula. So those that are safe, yes, we'll go after them. But if they're not safe, then we want to make sure that we put the customer first, and we want to make educated decisions. But people can be rest assured that every single ingredient has been clinically tested by different organizations. So we know that it's backed by clinical studies, and B, that the head of pediatric dermatology from Stanford has looked through every single ingredient and every single pathway of why skin conditions happen and has chosen those ingredients for that reason.
Okay, cool. I think that answered it. We have another one, which is, can you speak to any unique challenges you've faced breaking into this industry as both a young CEO and a female CEO of color?
Yeah, I think I'm 23. And so I think people want to push the young founder narrative on us. And I actually don't really subscribe to the young founder narrative. One, because I've been working in beauty at a pretty high level since I was 19, when I started that brand with Shea Moisture, and was under the guise of like that I got like a 2-year MBA while I was in college. I think second did you have a connection through? Did you work on that with a roommate who also had a business connection with that? So my roommate was the daughter of the owner. So UCLA is a really fun place because you meet tons of random people, and actually we became friends before that, but then we roomed together sophomore year, and she was like, let's start this business. Rochelle Dennett, she's amazing. She's now leading out Essence Girls United, which is Essence Magazine, their Gen Z division. And so we're building that brand together. And I think this young founder narrative story is always, look at this kid doing this thing. And I think it's awesome that I'm able to pursue this. And I feel privileged, honestly, that I'm able to have access to capital as a woman of color at my age. But I also am someone who, I was a Division I athlete in college. I ran track. And you don't get anywhere without a coach and without people who are much more wise than you. And so we've surrounded ourselves with people from day one who know what they're doing. On the dermatology side, I mentioned some of our investors Issa Rae, Yvonne Orji, Hannah Bronfman, Bozoma St. John, the CEOs of Casper, Warby Parker, Allbirds, Bombas, and Lyra Hippo, Mucker Capital. Like I knew that it's a list. But I went after that because I know what I know about Gen Z, but I also know what I don't know. And unlike, I guess, most young CEOs, I don't try to act arrogant that I know everything. I go seek out people who can help me understand that. And so I think for us, the young founder narrative is something that we don't like to subscribe to, because we hope to have people around us that really understand the business, like people who've already done this before us, and them help us build this brand, and us just be one part of what it means to build this brand. And so we're excited to be in the position we are. And I think for me, why we have so many people on the cap table, and particularly Black women, is that I know that selling or exiting your company makes a whole lot of people a lot more wealthier, right? And the wealth gap in this country for people of color, and for Black people specifically, is going to be at 0 by 2053. And so the only way that you can, increase decrease that wage gap is to allow people to have ownership. And so I was really adamant that we had more women of color, and more Black women on our cap table, so that they could also get a seat at the table. One, because they were part of our core audience, right? So we want our audience to also become successful off of what we're doing, because they're going to obviously know what the best course of action is. We also understand that by bringing them onto the cap table, we hopefully will allow for more topicals to be built. I think at Shea Moisture, that's what I learned after they sold their company to Unilever for north of $1 billion. They're actually one of the largest personal care acquisitions ever. Yeah. They created a $100 million fund for women of color. And we know that women of color, particularly Black women, receive less than 1% of venture capital. And I actually am the youngest Black woman to ever raise the amount of money I have. And I don't want that anymore. Like, I don't want to be a stat where it's like, oh, I'm the only one. I want to have more women and more Black women raise money, because then we get even more interesting companies. And there's so many undertapped places on the planet that we haven't seen venture money go to. And I don't think venture dollars are right for every company, but I'm excited to hopefully bring more people on. I don't want to be the only person that's doing this. I really want to make space for other people to also get access to capital and the right kind of networks to build huge businesses.
Yeah. Have you noticed the conversation, and in conversations with investors, even perhaps investors courting you that you don't do business with yet, sort of an active shift in wanting to get in front of and fund women of color, or Black women specifically? Is that a current conversation that's happening? And I have a couple more follow-ups, but I'll let you answer that first.
I'm heads down right now, so I haven't really been talking to anybody after we raised the seed round.
Yep.
But I think generally, like, everyone is hopefully moving towards understanding not only do like people of color and Black people have such robust cultures, especially cultures that really lead American culture. Yep. Like, we think about hip hop, we think about food, we think about just like all these different things, and you start to realize, oh wow, like communities of color really do bring like so many different fun things to the conversation. And then we start to think about these communities actually haven't had access to capital to create businesses. Like, there are so many billion-dollar opportunities in, Chicago, in Compton, in Watts. There's so many opportunities in those spaces. And the only people I believe are kind of right to bring those businesses to fruition, because they've lived that experience, is people who have lived in those communities. But if we think about the fact that they haven't had access to capital, it becomes hard, and it becomes like, we start to see like a lopsidedness of businesses that only serve like, millennials, or only serve like people in the coast. And so I'm excited, and I hope that investors that are listening out there really understand that, like, you're leaving money on the table when you don't invest in people of color. And I think we should always invest in the best people, but we shouldn't let like biases of race or a gender or ethnicity cloud how we think people can do business, even if it doesn't make sense to you. Because I think for a lot of investors right now, they don't have the lived experience of being in Compton or being in the South Side of Chicago. But we've seen Kanye West, we've seen Jay-Z, we've seen these people build these huge, massive brands with like, Nike or with Adidas. And the next Kanye West, the next Jay-Z, the next Rich Lou Dennis, the next billion-dollar founder is in these communities. And we really need to start to shift dollars to that place.
And you said, I think you mentioned earlier, part of, beyond building your business and a young business, staying heads down, it sounds like there's importance to you to getting getting your cap table to look differently than maybe, a lot of direct-to-consumer cap tables has in the way of, a diverse group of people and multiple Black women specifically already on the cap table.
They're just so it's just when I have conversations with them, they just know how to tap. I think the whole business of venture is untapped opportunities, right? And so when you bring these people onto your cap table who have so many ideas but have never had access, and a lot of these people are celebrities who have never had access to capital, right? You, one, get to borrow their audiences. And so now customer acquisition cost is going down. And then two, you get these ideas that you just would never have heard of typically. And I think when we start to think about that and look at that, we start to see that having these people on the cap table, having them be a part of your company is such a plus, and that it's a cheat code, honestly. And so I'm excited. And I think at Topicals, we're humbled to continue doing what we're doing. But I think at the end of the day, it's less about talking and more about doing, right? And so that's what we want to continue to do, is to do the work and to hopefully have people come on board to support our mission.
I read a Medium post you wrote, I think, in the last few weeks, and I'm not going to try to summarize the whole thing, but there were, you were making comparisons or contrasting between, Gen Z and millennials. Gen Zs, who I guess on the old end are 24, 25, I believe, and then and millennials, I sneak into the upper category, upper edge of millennial age groups, and I'm 38. So for entrepreneurs building consumer brands today and thinking about the customer base and those generations, what do you think are the most important key differentiators to think about? And why does it seems like you believe your target customer is in that Gen Z bucket?
So for us, Gen Z is a psychographic more than it's actually a age group. Mm-hmm. And so, because Gen Z is really about I read something and it was they are inclusive individualists, right? So it's they want things that are for the greater good, but they also are very much themselves and secure in what they do. And I think in that article, I talk about millennials being a little bit more what I think Webb Smith from 2PM, again, I mentioned him, he's amazing. You should definitely subscribe. You'll learn a ton.
I know Webb, yep.
I know Webb, yeah. But he's popularized, and in this term was obviously coined way back when, but the Henry, which is high earner, not rich yet. And I think a lot of Henrys think of luxury and they think of exclusivity as a good. And I think Gen Zers don't think about it like that. We think about inclusivity as being cool versus exclusive. And I think that's what Topicals is about. We're taking people who generally have, if you don't have clear skin and you're in the beauty industry, people are looking at you you're weird, right? They're looking at you how can you be a CEO and you have acne or you have X, Y, and Z? And so we're really trying to create that inclusivity, but also allow people to have individual feelings and individually represent themselves in the way that they want to. And so in that article, I really just go back and forth with, a lot of people are serving different customers. You may be serving more of the millennial, the Henry, while we may be serving more of the Gen Z, the inclusive individualist. And I think for people who are starting companies now, I think it's important to understand who you are and what you want to do, because to the wrong group, for example, to Gen Zers, being exclusive in the wrong way will really hurt your business, right? I think, yes, Gen Zers love Supreme. They love exclusive drops. They love that kind of stuff. But they're also very altruistic a lot of times, while millennials, they like that high price cashmere sweater. And that's what they're going to invest in. Not.
I may be an exception then, but keep going.
No, but I mean, again, there's so many different types, and we've only really scratched the surface in the psychographics of D2C, to be completely honest, because we've only really served the coasts, right? We've served the Bostons and the New Yorks, and we've served the San Franciscos and the LAs. We haven't really gone middle America just yet. And we're excited at Topicals too to think about what does middle America buy, and how do we, how can we serve them just as much as we're serving people on the coasts? But I think it's really important to understand who you're serving, because the message will come off muddled if you don't know.
That's actually a good segue. I spend a lot of time focused on Amazon and Walmart specifically. For better or worse, I've made the decision to write a book about those two and their battle. And that'll come out in a couple years.
Love that.
Thank you. My family doesn't love it because I'm a constant stress case. But anyway, you know, what I've found with, a lot of young brands is, they have often very strong feelings from the start about distribution through those two companies, either positive, like it's an immediate on-ramp for traction, if it's a category where people are showing intent on either Amazon or Walmart.com, or the opposite, which is like, I need to build community, I need to grow organically. And while you could call those organic growth, if you're not dumping a bunch of paid marketing into it, it's, you're putting yourself into sort of a stream of customers that you didn't sort of grow yourself. So it's a long way of just setting up the simple question, which is, what do you think about those two players as potential distribution points, and why?
I think I zoom out a little bit more when it comes to retail and being omni-channel. I think like for us, we think of retail as a marketing channel, right? So we don't think about it just as like volume and mass, but we think about like Topicals has a really, really interesting and important story to tell. Who's going to hold the microphone up? Who's going to do the brand building and come and be a partner with us, not just to sell product to people, because this isn't just like about consumerism, right? It's not just like buy as much as you can. It really is like, how are you thoughtful about the customer's purchases? How are you serving the customer outside of just, their physical, monetary exchange with you? And so that's what we think about first when we think about retail, is like, can that partner do that? And the second is accessibility. Like I mentioned earlier, like how accessible is this product to someone if it sells on Amazon or if it sells on Walmart? And so internally right now, we haven't decided anything on those two platforms, but we just think about retail in that same way. Meet your customer where they are. And I think the funny thing that I always hear people say is they're so afraid of losing customer data if they go through like a
wholesale
retailer.
Channel. Yep.
Yeah. And maybe I'm just young and I'm naive about it. But I think that if the only way you're getting customer information is through a sale on your website, you're already behind. You're already like, you don't know your customer. You don't know your community, you know your customer, which is like, you can get a community to become a customer. Like, again, I use this reference of these TikTok or YouTube influencers, right? They have community, not customer. And those are two different things. And I think you can turn a community into a customer quite easily if they believe in that shared experience. But it's very hard to take a customer and make them part of community. And so when people say, oh, I'm afraid to partner with a retailer because I think that they're going to steal our customer data or we won't get all of our customer data, you should be building loops to your customer where the only pathway to getting to know you for your customer should not just be through selling. And you'll understand a little bit better what I'm talking about with like things that Topicals will hopefully come out with over this year and next year. But I think that if
can you just maybe give us a little hint toward what you're talking about there?
I just think that if your customer is if you feel like you're only getting your data that's like really valuable in helping you make decisions about your customers only coming through like this sale, you haven't understood linear commerce yet. You're not getting it yet. And so I think the number one issue that D2C brands have, because I think D2C is an amazing channel. I think like being able to own the customer relationship is so great, but there are other ways outside of a customer making a sale on your channel for them to engage with the brand and for you to gain access to information about that customer, right? So like we did this game, Skin, Sun, and Stars. We didn't sell anything, but I have the same information as if I sold something to someone. And so again, you don't have to be afraid of sharing like the retail with someone else as you losing the customer data, especially if you're going into that retail channel, you should know that your customer is there, right? And so like D2C, the customer acquisition costs are rising every single day. And so why would I not, partner with someone who can A, hold up the microphone and do more brand building for us, and then B, also know that I'm getting sales. Like you can get a purchase order and know that you're going to get sales in. And so that's what we think about with like retail and customer building and community building.
And I shouldn't, in that Amazon Walmart question, I shouldn't neglect the job that Target has done over the last few years, trying very hard to connect with different customers and specifically with young up and coming brands with different perspectives. And I think it's worked out for Target and for some of the brands they've partnered with. Well, we could keep going, but I think we've kept people over an hour now. This has been really compelling and great discussion for me personally. I'd love everyone's feedback. Olamide, you included. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, email, Signal. I mean, any and all of it. I welcome your feedback. I want to thank our sponsor, Klarna, again. And I just want to remind folks that we do have a third session next week. I'll be interviewing the head of grocery at Amazon, Stephanie Landry. Olamide, thanks again for spending the time with us today. And hopefully we could do a follow-up after you announce some of the launches that seems like you were teasing today.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it's just fun or flare-ups. Like, that's all we think about every single day. And that's data-oriented, that's product-oriented, that's serving the customer through mental health. That's all of the things. And so we continuously try to do that. And so I guess just keep your eye on what we're doing and join the fun. There's so much fun happening. So join the fun.
All right. Thanks so much,
Thank
everyone.
Thank you for having me.
All right. My pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.